we've got a fly flying around here.
We do.
I'm
I thought
gonna.
you almost batted it
I
out.
did. I did. Let me get it.
Okay, just don't shoot me.
See, this is what we got right here. It's called a muggason. And
Did you?
we're gonna blast it.
Oh my gosh, I think you got it. Oh! It's dead.
Yeah.
My hero.
Hey everybody, I'm Steve.
And I'm Jen.
Welcome to our channel. We're so glad you joined us this week. We're trying to put out a video once a week. So you can jump on and check out the content and just what we feel like is important this week to talk about. And this week, we're going to talk about what?
We're going to talk about change.
Yeah, how do you deal with change? When change comes into your life, how do you respond? Do you get angry?
Yeah.
Are you happy? Are you a person that isn't I call them agents of change. I know a few of them, and I am not one of them. I don't resist change.
Mm,
I like consistency though,
yeah.
but I don't resist change. So this week we're going to be talking about change.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, change can be a lot harder than we think it's going to be. And sometimes we try to downplay it a little bit, and we don't actually give ourselves the time and the emotional preparation we need going into those moments.
You know, I have something that I call in my life rhythms and routines. And as you get older, you learn to love rhythms and routines. When you're young, maybe you're more spontaneous and you change things up a little bit more, and you see change as exciting. But as you get into your middle
Yeah.
life, you kind of really appreciate the consistency.
Yes.
And then we can be spontaneous, but we like to plan our spontaneity, should I say? But we're going through a major change
We
right
are.
now, and so we just thought we would speak out of our own
Mhm.
experience this week and talk to you about some of the changes we have going on in our lives right now.
All right. So we are currently leaving Northwest Church to take on a lead pastor role at Seattle Foursquare.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Yeah.
Until you really think about it, and you're like,
Oh.
not because you don't want to do it. The
No.
exciting part is doing it,
Yes.
but the
It's
other part is the leaving.
the leaving, the stepping out. It's scary. And knowing that we're going to change environments and that we're not going to be with our friends as much as we are used to. And we're going to build new relationships, but it's just a lot of change. So it's exciting, but scary.
Yeah. What do you think out of it, thinking about all this and processing? What do you think makes you the most I want to say scared, but that's not what I'm looking for. What makes you the most emotional about that?
Um, I think that there's a couple of things. It's comfortable. I'm comfortable at Northwest Church. I've learned a lot there. I have so many memories.
Yeah.
It's leaving my friends and my family and my comfort.
Right.
That's hard.
Yeah. The thing for me, I think, is knowing what to expect, right? Like I can wake up in the morning, I go to the gym, I know what to expect. That really, I'm going to get my butt kicked at the gym. And then I go to,
Thanks, Temple Fitness.
yeah, and then I go to church, and we actually have a facility there where we can shower and get ready. And I go to my desk and I pray. And then I spend some time praying for my team. I spend time catching up on
Yeah.
emails after that. And then everybody comes into the office, and we're like a family. And then
Yeah.
the weekend and the midweek services come, and we're like a family. And so it feels like you're losing that, even though we know that we'll gain that at Seattle
Yeah.
Foursquare. But there is this process of loss in change.
Yeah, and I think we can't forget that there are losses. And I know we're not the only ones who've gone through
Yeah.
change.
That's why this is so important
Yeah.
to talk about.
This last year has been horrendous for many people. There's been loss of
Yeah.
lives, loss of jobs,
That has been.
school not being out for our kids. That has been hard. It's been hard on the families. It's been hard on the kids. We've lost graduations and proms and homecomings.
And all social activity has come to a
Sports.
halt.
Yeah.
And so we're all going through this process
Mhm.
of loss.
Yeah.
And I this summer, I particularly recognized it in my life. And I
Mhm.
remember just having a moment, you and I
Yeah.
had a number of moments, but one in particular, we were sitting on our deck out back. It was a beautiful day,
Mhm.
and we were just talking about, and I just began to process some loss
Yeah.
that I've and it wasn't just this loss.
Yeah.
It kind of I projected this loss on all this other loss that I've
Mhm.
had over my lifetime, a number of situations. And what I found myself is I was, how do you say this? And it's going to sound funny. I was lost in the loss that I have had experienced over a lifetime. I
Yeah.
kind of lost myself.
Mhm.
And I lost my identity for a moment. I mean, I wasn't out of it. And I'm not going to say
Yeah.
I think I was dealing with depression and I
Mhm.
didn't know it.
Mhm.
And I think there are a lot of people out there that are dealing with depression. Number one, there's some that don't know it. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who are dealing with it, but they don't know
Mhm.
what to do about it.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is we're not recognizing because it's not necessarily the loss of life, that there's a lot of people grieving, but they're not recognizing that's
Hmm.
grief. That and the problem with that is that if we don't recognize it's grief,
Yeah.
we don't recognize that we're in the process of dealing with it.
Hmm.
And therefore we may not give ourselves the care we need.
Well, we don't know why we're feeling this way. And it's
Yeah.
just, we're not, we may not be particularly angry, but we're not particularly happy.
Mhm.
We're somewhere in the middle
Yeah.
and we feel lost.
Mhm.
And I think that's the deception of grief for us
Yeah.
at times is that we don't want to acknowledge it. It's
Yeah.
not that we don't want to, we don't even know how to
Yeah.
sometimes. And I'm always reminded of this. And this is why grief is so difficult on the human heart
Mhm.
and the human mind and our spirit, is because number one, when God designed humanity, Adam and Eve,
Yeah.
we were supposed to live forever.
Mhm.
And we were supposed to be at peace with God. And we were supposed to be in relationship
Mm.
with God. And so now we live in a fallen world
Mhm.
and it's the same design. So God had never designed us to have to deal with grief. And
Yeah.
that's why grief and loss is so foreign for us. It's foreign because we were never designed to deal with it. Now, God has given us the Holy Spirit.
Mhm.
He's given us His Son to redeem us
Mhm.
and to put us right relationship with God the Father. But there is still this thing of grief
Yeah.
that we still process through,
Mhm.
and it makes it hard on our lives. And when we don't recognize it and we don't deal with it in a healthy way and we just allow it to kind of take its course, we
Yeah.
lose ourselves.
Mhm. It also prevents us from, like, if I'm feeling emotional,
Mhm.
or, like, anxious or moody, I'll say to Steve, "Hey, just so you know, I'm feeling emotional." And he does the same thing. He never uses the word emotional, but
Generally not.
yeah, but if he's, like, not in a
I'll
good
say something
place.
like, I'm feeling grumpy.
Right, yeah, that means emotional in man
Hey,
language.
that's a masculine version of it. It's okay.
Grumpy.
It's
Yeah.
okay. Isn't that much better, guys? Grumpy? Yes.
Okay. Anyways, when we feel a certain way, we try to identify it for each other.
Mhm.
And there's two things that does. Number one, it lets the other person know I might need a little bit of compassion
Mhm.
or a little bit of grace. And the second thing that it does is it holds me accountable.
Yep.
All of a sudden, I'm
Yep.
taking responsibility for my feelings and
Mhm.
and what actions may come from that, and it really helps to change my mood. And
Mhm.
the reason I'm saying this in the midst of talking about this is it's the same thing I believe with when you're dealing with grief. Number one, recognizing it
Yep.
allows you to let those people who are close to you know that you're struggling and identifying what that is. And then it also gives you an accountability to deal with those feelings,
Mhm.
to deal with what's coming at you,
Mhm.
and be able to recognize where you're at.
Yeah, and when we do speak it out loud too,
Hmm.
we take authority and
Hmm.
responsibility over it. Now we
Yeah.
own it. We take ownership of what's
Hmm.
going on within us
Yeah.
instead of just being in a place of denial where
Hmm.
this isn't really going on, and I can act out and I
Hmm.
can say or do
Yeah.
or not say. Some
Hmm.
of us just shut down,
Yeah.
and we can do that, and we don't have to take ownership
Hmm.
of it because we just feel this certain
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
And loved ones need us to be interacting
Hmm.
with them and not just feeling this way or acting out or
Yeah.
however we may deal with it. what are the 5 stages of grief? The first is denial, when we're trying to avoid it,
Yeah.
when we're trying not to interact with it. And it's that idea of, if I ignore this thing in my life, it'll
Mhm.
go away. Has that
Yeah.
ever worked for you? It's never
No,
worked for me.
it's never worked for me, and I actually have experience with denial, a recent
Mm,
experience. In September, I was riding my bike, and through some not wise choices of mine, I got thrown out into traffic, and I got hit by a car.
mhm.
And of course, that's scary. I did get some injuries, but honestly, it really minor compared to what could have happened in that
Mhm.
process. But my kids and my husband kept saying to me, "You could have died. You could have died." And I kept downplaying it. It's not that big of a deal. It's not
Yeah.
that big of a deal. And then when that thing finally did smack me in between the eyes, and the reality of it
The
was there,
the
I,
car or
well, that happened too. After the car hit me, then the reality that my life was in jeopardy hit me. And I found myself just feeling embarrassed and angry and
Mhm.
sad. But at
Mhm.
first, that denial was really heavy. And
Mhm.
I was having a hard time accepting that I was in a place of danger.
Yeah. So we talked about the first stage being denial.
Hmm.
It's not always the first, and these are never in order.
Yeah,
So don't be
everybody
confused.
does.
There's no order. They can be out of order any which way. So
Hmm.
another characteristic in grief is anger. So being angry or having a short fuse, or outbursts,
Hmm.
or whatever, however
Yeah.
you deal with it. But you can be angry about the situation.
Mhm.
You can be mad that in this case, we lost our jobs, or we lost our social activities,
Yeah.
or we lost loved ones, and there's a lot of anger associated with it.
Yeah, it becomes an emotional outlet where you really don't have to deal with the other emotions. Instead, you just feel angry. You can be angry about anything and somehow
And
it
anger is tricky, not angry. Anger is tricky, and it's tricky because of this. When you get angry, you actually push everybody
Mhm.
away, and you cause yourself to be distant, and you kind of divide
Mm,
relationships, and you push important relationships away. And that's
mhm,
where anger can be it can be really
mhm,
unhealthy, because what you really need in the healing process
mm.
is relationship.
Yeah.
You need friends, you need family around you, and you need, ultimately, the process of grieving is a choice of being vulnerable,
Mhm,
because one of the steps in grief is acceptance.
mhm.
And when you begin to talk about
Yeah.
grief or loss, whatever you're going through, when you get to that point of
Mm,
acceptance, excuse me, acceptance is that step
mhm.
where you become vulnerable and
Yeah.
real with the overall idea of loss.
Yeah. Another stage is bargaining, and typically this is
Mm,
with God, right? And you'll often hear it like, if you just, if you just heal them, then I'll be a better person. Or, if you just give me back my job, then I'll
mm,
change my ways. And there's that part of bargaining, just
mhm.
trying to find um, a way to make everything go back, a way to get
Mm.
back what you've lost.
Yeah, and then there's another stage of grief is depression.
Hmm.
And depression is that deep stage of grief where you're wrestling with this idea of whatever it is that you've lost. And
Hmm.
I remember when I was a young man, I had a girlfriend who was killed suddenly in a car accident.
Hmm.
And there were 2 stages of grief that I remember clearly. The first was denial.
Hmm.
I kept thinking that if I would drive around a corner and she'd be getting gas in her car, and I'd suddenly see her, and this wasn't all real, that
Yeah.
she had passed. And I would find myself in daydreams thinking I would see her again.
Mm.
And, that's denial can do
Yeah.
that. And then I remember just kind of pulling back
Mhm.
and pulling back into myself when I realized that through denial was not going to get me to a place
Yeah.
that was going to be real, that it wasn't going to happen. And that's where depression sets in, and we kind of go inward, and we
Mhm.
shut everybody off,
Yeah.
and we're not vulnerable with anybody. And ultimately, I think the greatest thing we can do in the time of grief is be vulnerable
Mhm.
with others and tell them how we really feel.
It's hard to do when you're sinking in and when you're
Hmm.
isolating.
We had this activity the other morning. Our oldest daughter brought us all together, all of us, And so we went over to her house and she kind of planned this all out. And I'm very grateful that
Mhm.
she did this. And we were going to have breakfast. And then she springs this idea on us that she had been planning that in this transition, Jen and I think had been dealing with a lot of loss in it. And just, we knew what
Mhm.
we felt like God had told us
I
to
think we were
do.
just going through the
Yeah, and we
process.
were just hammering through,
Mm.
sometimes you just check boxes off and you get in mode. And we were in mode and she said, I want us to write a prayer to God, a letter to him. I'm just going to put some music on, and she put some Christian worship on, and we just sat down with a piece of paper and everybody wrote their parts out, and and everybody went around, and I think I was like fourth, and I wrote mine, and mine
It
was
was good.
mine was very a lot of gratitude to God,
Mhm.
and then what I needed God to do for me or for us, should I
Yeah.
say. And she's at the end, she said, Dad, that was good. But what I think I heard you say, and then she began to kind of unpack this. But some of us sometimes
Mhm.
even need help from
Yeah.
others to unpack
Mhm.
what's really in here because
Mhm.
we're not sure, we don't know how to do it. And I'll be honest with you, that was a moment
Mm.
that I needed, and I actually needed her
Mhm.
to speak into this part of my life
Yeah.
to bring freedom from something that was holding me. And
Mhm.
I really that morning it maybe didn't seem significant to anybody else in the room, but it was extremely significant to me.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's the stages of grief. So we have denial, we have anger, we got
Mm.
depression, we got
Bargaining.
acceptance and bargaining, and then
Mhm.
they can happen in any order. And that's kind of how we process this. But we're firm
Yeah.
believers that if we spend time in prayer
Mhm.
and journaling, if we spend time in worship, that God can begin to
Mhm.
heal those areas of our life.
Yeah.
And if we let other people in, they can speak into those areas
Mhm.
of our life, and we can begin to see hope.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I think it's really important that we recognize is there are a lot of people walking around in grief and maybe they're not even identifying it. And so I think right now is a good time in our communities, in our relationships, in
Yeah.
our homes, to just number one, assume the best of people. And
Isn't that so hard right now?
it is so hard
I
sometimes.
mean, when that guy cut you off, he meant to do it. I'm only kidding. It could have totally been an accident.
Yeah.
Maybe he needed to get off at that exit
Hmm.
and he didn't know where he was
Mm.
going. And Waze just said, exit
Yeah.
now. And so you kind of got cut off. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. I didn't do it.
But those are the kind of things that can get us ramped
Yeah.
up. And we're already amped up
Yeah.
from everything that's going on in our
Yeah.
country.
So if we can just give each other a little grace and a little space, and if we can be a little bit more honest about maybe where we're feeling, and we're not just talking about out in the community, because I think our families are sometimes the ones suffering the most, and our children, our spouses, our dogs. Do you have dogs?
Yeah, something that's interesting is when we love our neighbor,
Hmm.
it's infectious.
Yeah.
When we do something kind, a kind gesture, it's infectious.
Hmm.
And it's vice versa too. If we're angry, or if we're upset, or if we're amped up, or if we're
Hmm.
short, that's also infectious.
Hmm.
And the thing, we're dealing with a lot of infection in our world right now, aren't we? But what do we want to do? Do we
Yeah.
want to infect people with the love of God
Hmm.
and the kindness of God? Because I'll just remind us all, and I have to remind myself of this often, is that we are image bearers of God, that God made us in his image.
Yeah.
Every single person, every person is made in God's image. And every person deserves dignity and honor
Hmm.
and grace and love. And I think as we view people like that, it will change our perspective. You know who will change our perspective for the most? Ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we have something to give.
Mm.
We have love to give to our neighbor. We have love to give to our friends. We have love to give to maybe even that person that we're in a broken relationship with.
Hmm.
But God has given that to us
Yeah.
to give away. And if I'm going to infect somebody with something,
Hmm.
I'd much rather it be love than anything
Yeah.
else. So that's it. You got the big news. We're changing roles. We're going through change, and We're experiencing loss just like everybody else.
Yep.
And we just want to encourage you this week to be infectious with love for one another.
Amen.
All right, we'll see you guys next week.